Education, they say, makes all things possible, and credit goes to Thomas Babington Macaulay, and we all know who Macaulay is. That's the father of the Nigerian nationalist Herbert Macaulay. He was the first principal and founder of CMS Grammar School in Lagos. Now, it is also true that half education is worse than ignorance. I mean, someone who knows nothing may, never indulge himself or herself in something. But chances are that someone with, least understanding or even half knowledge will delude himself into doing something he has little or no knowledge about, and we all know the repercussions for such indulgences. We've had many instances of people with little knowledge, especially in our healthcare system, who carry out medical procedures for which they are not competent. So the economic and social development trajectory of a nation rests squarely on a human capacity development, which of course is in turn defined by the quality of education available to that population. For knowledge to have its value, it must also be applied with wisdom. Now that wisdom comes from or learned through education. So it is through education that the world has made tremendous progress in diverse fields and, of course, become significantly closer and safer. Since independence, Nigeria's educational development has, rotated between, some may say, the British structure and, of course, the American structure, which emphasizes a 6-3-3-4 system. Now, the first national policy on education was enunciated in the 1980s, and just like the changing world, education has also evolved, both in content and in context, bound to technological advancement. So all over the world, educational curricula reflect the needs and wants of individual nations. Skills development are tailored towards needs and wants, and of course that drives a country's domestic and foreign policies. The education sector in Nigeria is bleeding, to say the least, from wounds inflicted by, on one part, deficit of funds, dearth of quality teachers, decrepit learning infrastructure, government apathy, and most recently, the Jagba brain drain syndrome. Now, the brain drain in that sector, in the education sector, is increasingly, no doubt, eroding the quality of knowledge and depleting the needed skill capacity needed to grow our economy. So the impact is indeed huge, and I may add also overwhelming. So this year, of course, we know that the World Teachers' Day was celebrated, and the theme, of course, was to seek ways, of addressing shortage of teachers in the system, appropriate support services they require to achieve their objectives, and so on and so forth. But on late edition this week, we will focus our attention on renewed hope in the education sector, but specifically we shall be looking at northern education and why the deterioration has taken such a drastic step. I am Claire Adilabu Abdul Razak. Once again, I want to welcome you warmly to late edition this week. My guest today, Malam Ibrahim Shekrau, is a teacher par excellence. He graduated from the Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria, of course, with a degree in mathematics and education. He's also a principal emeritus, former director, and former permanent secretary. And in May 2003, he, of course, was sworn in as the executive governor of Kano State. He was re-elected in 2007 for another 4-year term, thus breaking the jinx to becoming the first elected governor to serve twice in that capacity. He is a distinguished senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, serving in the 9th Assembly. He, of course, I mustn't forget, he was Minister of Education, and currently he, of course, is a member of the Northern Region Committee of Education, of course, propelled by Sardauna Ahmadu Bello Memorial Foundation. He's the author of many books, and one is the Official Declaration of Aspiration, published in 2010. And again, just for emphasis, he was Minister of Education between 2014 and 2015 under the Goodluck Jonathan administration. All right. My next guest is a pretty lady. She's the President, U.S. Exchange Educational and Cultural Leadership Program Alumni Association, a graduate of political science from Bayero University, Kano, holds a master's degree in public policy and administration from the same university. Barakasani also holds a public-private partnership for infrastructure executive certificate from Harvard Kennedy School of Government in Boston, Massachusetts, in the USA. She has a wide range of experiences cut across several fields and has held several executive positions, including, of course, Commissioner for Agriculture in Kano State, SSA to the President on Agriculture from 2014 to 2015. Currently, she sits as Director, Petrogas Energy, Trade West Africa, recipient of many awards and acknowledgements, and let me just mention a few of them. Doctor of Public Administration, honoris causa, University of Denver in Colorado. All right, let me welcome my guest to late edition this week. Honorable Distinguished Senator, thank you very much for joining me. A senator is once a senator, so
thank you.
No problem.
Again, yes, thank you very much.
Yes, Dr. Barakasani, it's good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Yes, you don't look pressured by the exigencies of the time.
Thank you so much.
All right, of course, credit should go to your parents for giving you the path, the path to pursue your education. You were well bred, and you also a product of public school.
Yes, I attended public schools during some of my, time in school, and some private school as well.
What was the experience?
It was wonderful and great. We didn't have these bottlenecks and poor conditions that people are suffering. Our teachers were very brilliant, very accommodating, and we had everything we needed. We didn't even know we're in public school. We just know we're going through a smooth education. At
the time, you didn't have to worry about infrastructure deficit, shortage of teachers,
No.
or out of school. I mean, what was the attitude of girls in those days to school?
We're always happy going to school, and we made good friends, and there was full attendance, because I remember we didn't have a scanty class, and there was always competition between the boys and the girls. I had the experience of military school, public school, that is local education, Magwan Primary School precisely in Kano, and as well as private school. I have gone through Lebanon Primary School in Kano as well, and so many others due to the nature of our parents' jobs, So we've been moving from state to state, so I was able to experience many government schools. And honestly, I I think they really did a very good job, because I didn't go abroad for my education until much later when I went for my Harvard course.
I like that. I also didn't have the pleasure of going to a private school or even going out of the country. I am a homebred people. I am a homebred child, from public school. Your Excellency, were you also a local, bred?
Yeah, that is true. All my education from primary to secondary to university are all public schools. In fact, very interestingly, after my primary school, which is in the heart of the Kano city, the one we knew as Gidemakama Primary School, I was privileged to attend a school that is still very unique in its background and structure. Let me take a few minutes to explain. It is now called Aminu Kano Community Commercial College. It was renamed after Aminu Kano after his demise. The school started in 1967. By 1966, when the war and the crisis started, at that time, our state, and then largely in the north, the clerical staff were mostly from eastern part of Nigeria. Aminu Kano, who is used to be one of the greatest leaders that will always see beyond their nose and see the future, realized that when all the Southeasterners had started leaving, government was likely going to be crippled. And so by 1967, when the states were created, he called a few of his colleagues. Very few of them are still living, like Tankoya Kase, of course, a very famous politician and elder statesman, Aminu Dantata, who is still living, Amadou Traders, Anigizawa, and a host of others, including even in Lebanon, one Sraka, who was owning a furniture industry. He drew the attention, and he moved to Kaduna to talk to General Hassan, who was then the governor of the northern region at the early start of the military government. And they gave them the permission to start off a school, a community school. It's not owned by anybody. It's a school owned by the entire community. And by 1967, they went around, selected some students, and of course, I forgot to mention the famous Damasani Nkama Metamasuli was one of them. Damasani had to loan his garage along Ibrahim Tower Road. That's where the school started, in a very small corner of his garage. And then later on, when all the Igbos left, the famous Igbo Grammar School, Igbo Union Grammar School in Sabangari, became empty. So they approached Audubako, who granted them to use that school. That's where most of us studied. We were paying fees, and when we started, it looked like the school was not going nowhere. They recruited some auxiliary staff, they come around and were teaching, but the commitment was there. And by the time we finished up, most of us had very excellent results, flying colors. So just to tell you that at that time, it's not the issue of parents not supporting us. My father didn't go to school. He was an Annapolis man, of course. But they supported us. They gave us all we wanted, in spite of the fact that hardly most of our teachers were not even university graduates. But in the primary school, we had what we call pupil teachers. A class 7 primary school graduate who were recruited back to teach, grade 3 teachers, grade 2 teachers, but the commitment was there, the determination was there, and the patriotism. Exactly. So my schooling too was purely the public school.
Very memorable.
Yes,
very memorable. Very memorable.
And so you find that from primary up to the university, it was all within public school. But unfortunately, what has become the public school?
Yes, it's interesting that all of us are recipients, of the benefits of good quality, education from the public schools.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I also attended, a public primary school, public secondary school. I attended University of Lagos. It's a federal university. So I didn't go out. So we're all recipients. But I'm wondering, why then do we have the kind of drawback now that we're having? You talked about patriotism then. Your parents didn't go to school.
Yeah.
Yes, but
there
was the urge.
I think, you see, the problem started basically, if I may say, you see, school is made up of three major components. You have the child, the teacher, and the instructional materials or instructional facilities. If any of this is absent, of course the students will always be there. The teacher is the key. Even under the tree, if you have a very committed, well-remunerated teachers that are happy, will put in 24 hours to the students. And of course, if you also have the instructional materials. Unfortunately, over the years, there has been population explosion, of course. And most governments are not able to catch up to bring in the facilities and the teachers to really go at the same pace with the population growth. Because building a school, if you have the money, is a matter of few months. But you cannot produce the teacher over a few months.
Yes, but the problem, Malam Shakra, the problem with the education, generally all over the country, it's not just with, lack of funds or the infrastructure. The problem also lies with what someone called apathy. Parents are not willing to send their children to school. Let's take the North, for instance. That is, one of the issues that was raised. The parents are not willing to take especially the girl child, to school. So what is responsible for the apathy?
I think, let me interject here.
Yeah.
You see, part of it is to do with the history of education. I always hasten to remind people that we have to look at the way the whole thing came. Education in Nigeria came, of course, through the coastal areas. First of all, the Europeans came first for the slave trading. And thereafter, the missionaries followed up. And before then, up here in the north, there has been a system of education that existed for over 700, 800 years. The system is as old as Islam in the environment. So when the missionaries came through, of course, the colonization of the Europeans, our forefathers resisted, because initially they came in for the missionary purposes, and they resisted. And that was why they even introduced what we famously know as the indirect rule compared to the southern part of Nigeria. In fact, historically, the missionaries remained in the south for almost over 50 years before coming up to the north, because they were resistant. They had to use some element of force and so on to come over. So these have been the reason why there has been the resistance gradually.
I think definitely the disparity we have between the southern Nigeria and northern Nigeria has to do with this very reason, the colonial intervention. When the colonial system came in place, their major interest was not to educate Nigerians, but was to make the conditions suitable for them to be able to take what they came to take, imperialism. And because of that, the colonialists just found a way of stabilizing the system. So in the South, they educated them so that they can work in the office of the colonial government to be able to facilitate their purpose. Exactly. But in the North, whilst they tried to bring in education and they were met with this resistance, and then there was this agreement that, okay, allow us with our religion and culture and we'll give you what you want, don't tamper. And they found this access through our noble houses. So nobility was promoted more than education. And the royal fathers were giving them what they wanted. So the precondition of working in the colonial NA office, Native Authority office, was royalty. If you come from that family, you are, you have access. So there was less interest in education because our people know that even if you get it, you wouldn't have access because you are not from that particular place. But if you look at it generally, Northern people are extremely intelligent because the religion we have, that's Islam, allows you to memorize the Quran of 60 isms off head. So if you can have a girl child that is ages 6 to 18 that can memorize the Quran, which is over 500 pages in her brain, what else do you want?
Madam Shekrau, even in your recommendations, in the recommendations of the committee of the Northern,
the conference.
Yes, the conference. There wasn't mention of this factor, this point that Dr. Sani is raising. And it's a very fundamental point that she's raised.
No, you see, it's mentioned in a different way. You see, by saying that we have to really get the confidence of the society, confidence of all major stakeholders. Some of these things, you see, it's not just about legislation. Many states felt that they can create laws to compel people to go, but it's about enlightening them. And the acceptability of the system. When we came on board, I mentioned it a couple of days when we were discussing here, that in 2003 we conducted a census. In Kano alone, we had over 27,000 Quranic schools that are full-fledged schools. All you have to do is, and parents are sending them to those schools because they believe in that system. Our challenge is to encourage them to understand that the Western system hasn't any difference in terms of the values that will be impacted on the child, and also accommodating the religious angle, as my sister mentioned. And this is what we benefited from. I think one of the major problems is this population explosion. And if I may go back a little bit to the history, UPE started in 75, 76. And the products came out in the year about 1980, 81, because that was the time when explosion, overpopulation started in our schools. Most of the governments, not only in the North, generally in the Federation, were not ready to accommodate these UPE products. So the only way to do it was to increase the number per class. When we all went to school, the number was not between 20, 25, 30 maximum in a class. But today, people are talking of 80, 100, some are even saying 120 in a class because of the population. And governments, not only in the North, generally, were not able to catch up with the expansion because there was the need for more schools to accommodate this population explosion, which would have taken care of the overcrowding in any given classroom.
Yes, but the population explosion did not choose a particular region. The population explosion is it's all over. It's all over. Yes, and then when you compare today, when you compare the education, if you look at the indices, it tends to favor the southern part of the country.
Of course, historically, yes. I told you,
yes,
the Western system of education existed for almost about 50 years before it was accepted up in the North for obvious reasons.
Yes, which we have stated
that we have mentioned that.
Yeah.
So I think I always don't encourage this outright comparison.
Yeah. Okay, we're not going to compare.
What we want, because of this historical reason, if you are talking of the number of schools, number of by 1980-81, when I was a school principal, Kano State did not have up to 200 schools. But at that time, Oyo State has 600 secondary schools. I was less than 200.
So we will look
at about the number.
Yes, we will look at the quality. I would like to know what, feminine groups, such as being championed by Dr. Baraka Sani here. I'd like to know what you're doing, how what you're doing to bridge the gap, what you're doing to, raise awareness, what you're doing to probably shore up access, for the girl child specifically. We'll just take a short break. When we come back, of course, Malam Ibrahim Shekarau and Dr. Baraka Sani will be giving us perspectives to this question. So you're watching Date Edition. Let's take a short break. Right, welcome back. You're watching Date Edition, and we're looking at deteriorating quality of education in the northern part of Nigeria. Of course, I have with me former Minister of Education and former two-time State Governor of Kano State, and of course, emeritus principal in the person of Malam Ibrahim Shekarau. Once again, thank you for joining me. Dr. Baraka Sani is a woman leader. She's a mobilizer. She's an educationist and former commissioner also from Kano State. Incidentally, I didn't plan to have both of my guests from Kano State. It wasn't planned, but let's come back to the question, and I'm coming straight to you, Dr. Baraka Sani. What are the feminine groups doing? Are they just folding their arms and watching the girl child, just fizzle out of, reckoning?
Well, you see, for me, I always draw the attention of my colleagues. When you are fighting a feminine cause, you do not restrict yourself to women alone. You need the men. You need the he for she's to help you in the crusade. And the first mistake you make is when you put yourselves as women and trying to fight a cause for women. That shouldn't be the case. Good. Having said that, excellent. For the girl child, there tends to be this mistake that you always have a program trying to put the girl child back in school. For me, I always like to look at the genesis, and then I like to look at the way, it applies to the various sectors of the country. We say the girl child, which is ages 6 to 18. We need to look at the main cause. Sometimes, we discuss the cause, we find the policies, but when it comes to implementation, we do not get it right, or we don't want to get it right, or certain factors influence the implementation, and then we crash and go back to square one. You see, we say factors like early marriage, we say poverty, we say insecurity, we say language, we say political will, and so many others. More or less, it has become a rhetoric to be mentioning them, because I heard one senator saying that we read O.A. Lawal, and up till today, we are still trying to solve the problems in O.A. Lawal, and we have not solved them, and we are still reciting them.
I read O.A. Lawal as
well. So for me,
small, handbook.
For me, the way to resolve the issues with the girl child education still has to go back to history, tradition, local factors in every society. If you are tackling the girl child education in the north, the first thing is you need to make a case for the parents to see the reason why they should send their girl child to school while they are suffering, there is poverty, they are hungry, and they see that she can hawk and bring them some money. And they see that they are going to marry her and reduce their responsibilities while the male child will keep the family name and come back home. What do we need to do? We need to attach a reward system. For every time you see that whatever has a reward system, even your child, if you send your child 3 times out of the house and he comes back, bring me water, comes back, go and bring my shoes, say, Mommy, I'm tired. But tell your child that when you bring my shoes, I will give you the money for the amusement park. You will see, he will never be tired. He will even come and ask you, Mommy, do you have any messages for me to go and deliver? You understand? For instance, now we have the mass marriage that we do in the north, whereby we get a lot of people, the couples that marry them up, the government supports them. How about attaching that marriage aspect to people who present the 9-year experience in education, which is the primary school education, and the junior secondary school, which is the mandatory 9 years. Yes, for the basic education.
Yes, exactly.
Well, how about if we now say we can tie that to them, that once they present that, then the government accepts to now give them that support. So their parents will see the value in sending their children to school. How about looking at radio? What is the support we can get from the media? Everybody in the north listens to radio. I must confess to you, one of the reasons I love going back home is to open my radio station and listen to the various programs on the radio. What have we done to use the radio to employ the services of the media to help us with the education? What have we done to support the NTA, for instance, that has widespread to help us with this education? Many of our grandchildren now speak English, not because they are taught, but because they watch cartoons and they watch so many things. When they speak, you think they were taught by the Americans or somebody. So it means the media has a great role to play, even in remote areas where we cannot reach them, irrespective of insecurity. So what we need to do is to now focus and have a special arrangement how we can get people to leverage, and then how do you get them to listen? It's also back to the reward system. You tell them, if you listen to that program, there's a phone in, and if you get the question right, you are entitled to A, B, C. And you see how people will be rushing.
Who initiates this reward system?
The government. All the millions that the government is spending trying to support girl child education in the wrong way, why can't they channel them back into the right way? Because you cannot keep doing the same thing, getting the wrong result, and expecting a new result next time you do it. There was over 12 trillion naira was spent by the federal government on the northern part of Nigeria to support education. Where is it? Over $500 million were spent by the NGO, the development partners in 5 Nigerian states, northern states. Where is the impact? Over $117 million was spent by the US government to support that education in northern Nigeria. Where is the impact? The Agile program by the federal government that was meant to support adolescent girls, but it was only...
So you think the gap in all of this, the gap in impact is the lack of the reward system, or
a reward system taking cognizance of local conditions. You need to go back to the royal fathers. You see, in the north, traditional leaders play a great role, but we, the politicians, eroded that role, thinking it is better we accumulate power, forgetting that they have something which we don't have. We are terminal, we are tenured, while the traditional fathers are not. They are there unless they die.
What role should they play? Yes.
Number one, when you know that this person is the leader in your community and he speaks to you, you tend to believe him more because he is there. He can be arrested. You can trace his address. You can track him. Do you get? So if you now give them as the custodians and as the chief advocates of this policy on the girl child, you see, for me to allow you to have my daughter, I need to trust you and believe you because of so many problems that have suddenly, So if the traditional rulers are giving this as an assignment, they have structure down to the ward level, down to the unit level, because we even have Meungwa to that level, which we politicians don't have. And even if we have, they are tenured. So there's no continuity. And even when you talk about investment, once there's no continuity, that's why investors do not trust a system.
Yes.
In fact, that is where I want to pick from where she said involvement of the traditional institution. This is very crucial. And I also agree with the word that key word of trust. The parents have to trust the leadership, has to trust the system. When we went to school, mostly the schools in the 50s and 60s were owned by the native authorities. They were in charge. You'll see the emir visiting schools. In fact, they feel the schools belong to them, the district head, the village head, the angwa, and the rest. And up till this time, people trust that system the more. If there's any quarrel in any community, they don't go to the house of the councillor. They don't go to the house of the chairman. They run to Meangwa, they run to the district head, up to the emir. If we sit in council today in the emir's palace, up till today, people troop in there to lodge their complaints. Yeah. Even though they knew the emir is no longer the emirate council, is no longer in charge of any, they don't have any government responsibility. But you can see the trust. And the political angle, as she said, you see the commitment of the political leadership. A very good example that I may cite, when we came in 2003, the very day I was sworn in, I made girl-child education free at all levels. And this is part of the incentives. This is part of what we need to encourage them.
She mentioned the issue of the role that government needs to play. Yes. And I know that Your Excellency, you were also a minister in this country, the Minister of Education. And at the time, at your time, if I remember rightly, I know the Almajiri school system, was actually given
a lot of attention.
Yes.
Exactly.
So what happened?
No, I think, you see, the concern, we were able to convince the federal government that, look, these children we're talking about out of school, most of them are in the Quranic schools, which is popularly known as the Sangaya schools. The fact that they are not counted as part of those going to school is because those institutions were not recognized and brought up as part of the school system in Nigeria. So what we've decided to do is really to see what can we do to really encourage and accommodate these Angaya schools gradually. This thing cannot happen overnight. So the federal government released a lot of funds to build up these Angaya schools. Unfortunately, the cooperation of most of the state governments were not forthcoming. The whole idea was that how do we now bring up the Angaya schools, the Quranic schools, without interfering with their curriculum? We realized that rushing to bring them on board into 2+2, A, B, C, D was not the issue. But allow them. Do you know that even within the Quranic schools, the Angaya schools, there is this aspect of how to read and write?
Dr. Barkasani, I would like you to tell us exactly what you have been up to, because I discovered that you've been doing a lot. You're not letting things lie the way they are in terms of the deterioration of the quality of education in the north. I would also like the former minister to talk to us about implementing the findings of the committee. One thing is to come out with findings.
Yeah.
Another thing is to implement them. So, Dr. Barkasani, let's start with you.
Well, for me, through my NGO, WIFCO, Worldwide Initiative for Community Development and Global Health, what we do, we go to like villages, we find the students and women, we ask them to release their girl child to school, and then we empower them, like give them some start-up capital, so that with that they will allow their girl child go to school. We give them uniform and some textbooks. We've done that in some places. Let's say Gezawa, Tokarawa, what is it called? Jogana Primary School and their stuff. So this way, it's a win-win for the girl child and the parents. Secondly, we have also written, we have held seminars where we bring the youths together, and including the girl child, and talk to them about the necessity for them to go to school. No matter how you want to help them, if they do not possess the requisite qualification, they may not be able to have that opportunity. We have written to the government, like that is, we do a communique and we pass it on to the government, where it clearly indicates the role, the action plan, who is to do. For instance, we advocated for short-term courses, just like Google does, 3 months. So it will reduce the time that you need to send the children to school, so that, let them start somewhere, then they can continue. Maybe some of them find it difficult to go at a stretch. So they should be given training along with some skills, so that along the way, if some of them fall off from the formal system, they can still benefit from the skills. Just like China, you see almost every household, you find that they have a small-scale production system, and they use their language in some certain instances to train the children. So I think now, if you look at the evolving trends in education, value has now been moved away from cramming and data processing towards, real life situation.
Hands-on,
yes, so hands-on. So you see, we should play down the fact that they have to get a certificate, SSCE, and so on. Our prerogatives should be to get them educated and become useful to themselves.
Yes, because the all efforts now are just geared towards, we must get them enrolled in a classroom, in a particular classroom.
So you see,
but we know that education has evolved.
It has evolved.
Yes.
The world over, you see, there's use of technology, there's use of values over, your passion, your positive, what you really want, and then can you apply it? Then the interconnectivity between the family, between the children and educators. You see, there is this synchronization whereby the values are the messaging has to be, consistent, so that what you learn at home, you continue. You don't see something entirely different. And then also you talk about the connectivity, global connectivity with the best practice. So with technology now, the shortages of teachers now can be resolved, because you can now sit in a room with 1,000 students and one resource person can take them on the lesson. So we need to invest more on that avenue, so that we do not start looking for teachers who take longer to train.
Have we gotten to this stage?
Functional education is the key.
Precisely.
In fact, if you go to the national policy on education, this has been emphasized. Unfortunately, one of the things we identified in the conference and we recommended is that we must continue to drum it into the head of the political leadership. Most of this thing revolves around the will, the political will, the willingness of the leadership. You see, all of our resources in government, largely in the north, when we have very few of the private enterprises, private schools, we rely largely on the government resources. And you must get those in charge of these government resources to agree with some of these priorities. And this is part of what we're trying to do, to sensitize the political leadership, the executive arm, the legislators, and so on, because the part of the problem from experience now is that when the budget comes, if the governor probably wants to build up 100 schools, the legislators will want to have small this in their constituencies, small that, small this, small that, drainages, culverts, and so on, because they feel these are the quick wins to return them back to power. But so you cannot get the executive alone. All the legislators too must be carried along, so that they understand if the governor sends 25%, 30% of the budget to education, the legislators will understand and give the approval.
Okay, this is sad.
So we are really going through that. Another angle, of course, is the traditional institutions.
Please keep this. I want you to address this issue.
The traditional institutions. That's why most of the emirs from the Sultan downwards were all in attendance in our conference.
Yeah.
And still, it revolves back to the political leadership to involve them. Because officially in the constitution they don't have any role. But if you have the willingness as a leader in your state, you can involve them. We did a lot of that. For example, I compelled the
But do they need to be involved? Do they need to wait for government to involve them? This is a role traditionally bestowed upon them.
Where the issue is that, for example, now we realize that even if they want to be involved, they need to have some basic facilities. For example, in Kano, when we came aboard, I literally compel the local governments to buy vehicles for the district heads so that they move around. By the time we gave them very strong vehicles, so that the emir insisted they must go around weekly into the hinterlands, their villages, to inspect schools and so on. So they need all this, the funding of course too. They need some funds to move around, to make sure they make the reports. So the involvement of, and the parents too, we are asking the ministries of education and the school managers to encourage parent-teachers associations, all students association, so that at least when all students meet in the school, they are a source of great inspiration to the students in the school. They will see you if you visit your school today now.
No, absolutely. There's no doubt about the strength of the PTA and of course the old students association. But Dr. Barka Sani, again, like we all know that education is on the concurrent list. So the state government and the local government authorities must play a very prominent role, especially at the primary and secondary levels of education, which is where we're having our greatest headache from. So what do you think we can do, to ensure that state executives give that priority attention? Up till we speak, the budgetary allocation recommended for the education sector, we've not even met it at the federal level, not to talk of yes. So what can we do? How can we get them refocused to education?
You see, Claire, no matter the amount of money you give to education, if you do not get the track right, it will just be like pouring salt into the ocean. For me, I am not so worried about the budget alone. But the willingness, political willpower is a very important factor. Let me give you an example. The federal government came up with the UBEC program. That is the superb at the state level. The onus is on the state government to pay up the counterpart funding so that they can leverage on the federal government funding. Do you know that many state governors do not pay the counterpart because it is a structured program?
What should be done to them? Should we just fold their arms and watch them and watch that happen?
No, I don't think you should fold your arms. That's why I am saying, like, in my capacity as an individual, my NGO, I get my people, I do the workshop with the professors and every person, resource person, I put it in the communique, I take it to the secretary, to the state government. Nobody asked me to do so, but I want to be absorbed that tomorrow posterity will remember me that I contributed. And if you don't do it, at least I have done my best. But that is one angle. But the second angle, that has to do with the royal fathers, like we said. You see, if you go to places like the USA now, if you are going in, taking your child into a public school, it is the area you live in that determines the school that your child is going to be admitted into, basically in the primary education. And if we now take that as an example,
a model,
and let's say in every ward, we make sure the community is involved in setting up the primary school of that community. And anybody that has a child going to primary school has to be in the area within where he lives. So your child does not have to travel 1 kilometer to go to school. That is the beginning of confidence building, because the mother knows that with a big shout, she can hear her daughter's voice. And then the community people should be in charge of, advising the school, the values, the processes. So this will further convince them that what is happening in that school is good.
Dr. Barikasani, let me pause you. Your last thoughts, your closing thoughts, please.
Well, my thought is that, you see, whatever we do in the education system, the teacher is the key. And so long as the treatment, the training, the recruitment, the incentives are not anything to write home about, you can never get the system to work. No amount of money will make the difference. Even if you have the entire budget into education, so long as the person that makes the system work is the teacher. So long as the recruitment, the training, the incentives, when we were recruited as teachers, and we have all the incentives. I had, apart from, it's not about the package that we call salary, but promotion, facilities around, job interest, the environment that you work, allowances, house master's allowance, form master's allowance, mathematics teacher allowance, science master's allowance. In fact, in my time, which is not too far away, in the mid-70s, we are getting even shopping allowance for teachers living in the rural areas.
So what's your recommendation now?
My recommendation is that all state governments, whether federal, state, or local, we should focus on what do we do to encourage our youth to go into the institutions to become teachers, and we encourage them by the incentive and the improvement in the remuneration, so that you encourage those coming in and you are able to retain those
that are read inside. Beautiful.
That's right.
Dr. Barikasani, your last, what's your parting words?
Well, my parting words is that the problems are numerous, the challenges are enormous, the resources are meager. So within what is available, I think we should start getting it right by doing tangible interventions that can be evaluated, so that we know if we are at 10, tomorrow we are at 20, we know we are going to 30. Instead of pouring water into the ocean and salt, there's nothing you can say whether it is tasting or it's not tasting. Secondly, we can make use of the NYSC scheme. Like in other countries, when you graduate, you have to go through the military training. In case there is a problem in your country, you are called back to the fields. Everyone is a soldier. In Nigeria, depending on the emergency, if we have this emergency in the north, every NYSC student in the north, except the doctors and maybe essential life-saving discipline, must do their jobs in the teaching profession, so that we can raise that cadre of education.
Brilliant.
Then number three,
the last one.
Number three and the last one is that the federal government should reduce operating programs. They should go more on policy, monitoring, evaluation, and setting reward system and projection for the states, so that they can compete to get that reward system based on analysis. And then the state governments will be working with the local government areas. They should empower them to carry out their jobs, because the basic primary education is the responsibility of the local government, while the secondary education is more or less a shared responsibility. So, and our rich people should also be pumping resources to support logistics and infrastructure.
And there are very, very many rich people in the north.
Yes.
That, we saw, we saw them during the conference. Just one person can even close the gap that we are all talking about.
Honestly.
Dr. Barikasani, you've given us quite some excellent suggestions, and I'd like to appreciate you. Dr. Barikasani is the president, U.S. Exchange Educational and Cultural Leadership Program Alumni Association. Thank you once again, Dr. Barikasani, for your thoughts. Amala Ibrahim Shekrao, I'd like to appreciate you also. It's not easy to, come together and, do a research, come out with findings, and you are pushing for implementation of your findings. And I really like to commend, the group for doing that. I wish that the same step can be taken, by, other Nigerians in other sectors of our economy. If we take such steps, we'll be like he's saying, we'll be making progress from 10 to 15 to 20 instead of being stagnant or throwing salt into the ocean, as she said. Malam Ibrahim Shikrao, thank you very much for coming for the first time on Late Edition, and I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so there you have it. It's been an exciting 55 minutes on Late Edition this week. I'd like to thank you once again for watching, and join us again on the program. From me and the production crew, it's goodbye.